So I watched the Adames and Ammo Williams fight last night, and Carlos Adames looks great. He was moving really, really, really well. He understood how to play that like open exchange game. He was attacking with a technique that on our team we call a chug. So a chug is you stepping in with your rear hand. It's a simultaneous counter and you do it back to back. So you step your lead foot, you throw your rear hand, and then you do that again. And it's spectacular in open exchanges against Southpaws because you immediately attack that center line with a powerful straight punch while establishing that lead foot dominant position. And then you hold that position as that person tries to exit by stepping in again. Renee on our team is really, really good at the chug. Cam, another little southpaw, is very, very good at the chug. Coach finally got a day off. Yeah, I wish, buddy. I'm gonna be here for 45 minutes and then I gotta run to work. I got a couple lessons, a couple vettings, and then I got 8 rounds of sparring. I got 4 with Tyrell and 4 with Wes, hopefully. Haven't worked with Wes in a long time, but before the channel even started was the last time he had his last fight. But he's an astonishingly good puncher, an astonishingly good boxer, and he's probably the only actual puncher at our gym. And that doesn't just mean he hits hard. There are plenty of guys who hits hard. When I say he's a puncher, I mean by like disposition. He's a puncher. He's always in a good, strong stance. He's patient. His defense is small and subtle and doesn't compromise his position to be able to attack out of. Those are things that are the hardest, making you a puncher. Yeah, 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 yeah. Punching hard is part of it, but to be a puncher by style, that patience, that position, and just that confidence that you're going to land your shot. Deontay Wilder's a good example of a guy who's an excellent puncher. And like, obviously, that sounds like a no-brainer, but like people forget because they just watch his highlights. It's like, oh yeah, that guy's a puncher. But like, watch his whole fights. If you watch his whole fights, you can really, really, really see how patient he is. Like, Deontay Wilder is frequently losing like every round until suddenly he wins. He has that confidence that he's gonna find that shot. I always think about his 2 fights with, I think it was Luis Ortiz, that heavyweight southpaw. Yeah, he's just so patient. I appreciate it, you know? Okay, let's go through some of these questions here.
Can you do the 2 that have already been on your post?
Well, those people might not be here yet.
Yeah, exactly. But at the beginning is the one that I record and put on YouTube, so anyone
Ah,
who can't make it to the live stream will get their answers.
okay, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, so we had a couple questions that were already kind of pre-thrown in here when we announced that we're doing this coffee with Coach. Guys, please leave your questions below. I'm going to chisel through them, but let me get to those first couple questions first. Um, the first question was, what was it, Lee? It was, what are the common beginner mistakes?
Yeah, what are the habits, bad
Yeah,
habits that
bad habits from beginners. The number one bad habit, and I'm going to quote, I think Don Turner here, is he has this quote where he says, most beginners knock themselves out. And he says most beginners knock themselves out because they try to cover too much distance. They try to cover too much ground. They leap into exchanges. And then when they leap into an exchange and they run into a shot, that force is compounded. If you're driving into range at 20 miles an hour and somebody's throwing a punch at 30 miles an hour, that's a 50-mile-an-hour collision. You don't really want to be diving, jumping anywhere, especially when you're a beginner. You look at guys who have legendary chins, look at Canelo, look at Triple G, look at Chavez, these are guys, James Toney's another one with a very good chin, these are guys who don't jump anywhere. They creep, they stalk, they pressure. Bob at the pros camp used to say, you don't chase, you obstruct. You're in the way of where this person wants to go. That's how you create exchanges. You put yourself in the path that they want to travel through, and they'll come to you. You shouldn't be chasing in a fight if you can help it. You guys have heard me say this many, many times before. My biggest fear in a fight, is that I just chase a guy around for 9 minutes and look silly and don't get anything done. That's why I work very, very hard on cutting off the ring, on defending in, on layering in my defense, on simultaneous counters. I do all these things so that I can pursue somebody safely and effectively without looking desperate or leaving myself vulnerable for a big punch. The other question that I got online was about how do you train kids? Um, Great question. Coach, man, I love working with kids. I struggle if I have a good style with kids. I like to get into the weeds about the tactics and the positions and the strategy. And something I know about kids, we've done lots of like 6 week, 10 week camps with local kids, summer camps, preseason camps for like wrestling and football and stuff like that that are boxing focused. Camps for at-risk kids, all sorts of stuff. We've probably done 6 or 7 of those style camps. And the way that I like to coach, my A game doesn't come across well for kids. What you need to remember with kids is a couple things. The first thing is they need to be having fun and they need to be busy, and you really want them working as one single group together. Those are the big things. If you put two little, you put two 9-year-olds off on their own to do a drill, they're not going to do those drills really well. They're going to get distracted, and that's even worse. Every generation is more easily distracted than the one before it. It's not your guys' fault. You have a cabal of evil, influential people running the world and getting you addicted to your phone. It is what it is. But kids have less attention. So, if you can make them a big group where that attention is distributed among 10 people, that usually helps. If you can get them doing something fun, if you can keep them busy, those are the important things. Don't get too hung up on technique. Certainly don't worry about too much tactic or strategy when you're starting with kids. Especially technique stuff. Don't get super hung up on technique with kids, because when they hit puberty and they grow, all of their levers, their frame, their mass, their timing, like all of that is going to shift around dramatically, and you're going to have to do all of it again anyway. Okay. So, it doesn't do you any good to get a 6-year-old throwing a perfect left hook, because when he's 16, you're going to have to relearn it. What as far as I'm concerned, youth boxing, kids boxing is really just a gameness test. It's about helping that kid to be brave and to see that he's not going to get hurt out there. They put the big gloves on these kids and they send them out there 1 minute at a time, 1 minute at a time. And that 1 minute at a time, like I said, is just a gameness test. It's like, show me you're brave enough to get in there. And then they come back and they just worked really hard. It's like, okay, show me you're game enough to get in there again. It's about teaching a young kid to be brave. That's the important thing. Okay, let's get to the questions that we have here now after talking about the ones that people kind of threw on. Okay, so
Can you see the chat?
I can see the chat. All right, so first one, Coach, many people say I got power, but I can't use it. It's one of those things where the least important thing when I walk into a new gym, let's say I'm traveling to spar, and I walk into a new gym and I see a guy who's all thunder and lightning on the heavy bag or on the mitts, and he's making lots of noise and he's aggressive and he's powerful. That is the least valuable thing when it comes time to spar. I'm not worried about that guy. If I see somebody shadow boxing looking really slick, if I see somebody on the slip bag looking really slick, if I see somebody on the double-ended bag and they're playing with rhythm and they got defense and movement and all that stuff, there are so many intangibles that need to be present for you to actually use power that you have in a fight that if you're not sparring or if you're not fighting, I don't care if you have power. So many guys look like monsters when they're hitting the bag, and then they're total puppy dogs when they get in there to spar, because they don't have their distance right, they don't have their position right, they don't have their feet under them, they're picking bad moments, they're throwing big fat punches that leave them vulnerable, that are easy to see and easy to counter. That's something, I'll die on the hill. You look at like Mike Tyson or Triple G are both, I would say this about both of them. I don't think that either of those guys is like a top 10 puncher. I think they're very hard, very above average punchers. Don't get me wrong. But I think both of their successes really come from their ability to like land clean, flush, accurate, surprising shots. And that does a lot. If you've got a little bit above average power and you combine that with a good skill set that lets you land really cleanly, it's going to look like you've got like world ending power. Good. What else do we got going on here? Morning coach, do you have any tips to adapt the system for fighting different strategies like counterpuncher, pressure fighter, outboxer? Yes, I do. That's J Roth 39. Chime back in at the bottom here if this isn't exactly what you meant, but usually, the idea of those three kind of archetypes of boxing is that they fit like a rock paper scissors kind of style of strategy where outfighters are usually going to beat punchers. Punchers are usually going to beat pressure fighters, and pressure fighters are usually going to beat punchers. Now, pressure fighters are usually going to beat outfighters. Forgive me. So it goes, outfighters beat punchers, punchers beat pressure fighters beat outfighters. That's the general kind of alignment that we're playing with here. And the reason for that is we were talking about punchers earlier. Punchers need to be patient. They need to have their feet planted. They need to pick their moments carefully, which means they frequently lose to outfighters that don't stand in front of them, that move their feet a lot, that use a lot of feints and create a lot of ambiguity, that use their jab, which is a fairly like low risk punch to throw. Outfighters are going to stick and move on a puncher. They're not going to give them a lot of opportunities to land a good flush punch, and they're going to win the boxing match. Punchers usually beat pressure fighters because pressure fighters give punchers lots of opportunities to counter. A pressure fighter's got to get in there. He's got to put the pressure on. He's got to threaten. He's got to create engagements and exchanges. And that's a risky thing to do with a puncher. So frequently punchers will beat pressure fighters. Pressure fighters usually beat outfighters because outfighters want a nice, like clean, stick and move, Olympic style kind of game of boxing here. And it's the whole brawl a boxer kind of platitude that like you want to get in there and you want to rough them up and you want to set a pace where they don't have a nice clean fight in front of them, and all of their like little mistakes and positional errors and bad habits will be their undoing if you can make them stack those mistakes and make them at pace. Is that what you meant, J Roth, my man? Yeah, I'll circle back to that. Okay. Good. Continuing through. Yep, Lee's doing a great job in the comment section over here linking videos. Coach got built-in defense with that beard. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I will say the beard does nothing to cushion punches, but it does create a really nice like decoy chin under my chin. My chin ends here. I got like a little like Michael Cera chin, but I got all this.
Not true.
Lee says that's not true, but the punches go right through my beard, which does kind of help. It creates like a decoy, which is good. I spend a lot of time getting punched in the chest and punched in the neck, and I'll take that over getting punched in the jaw for sure. Good. Voodoo 2130. Hi, coach. I'm a huge fan of your lane theory videos. Thank you very much. And I had a lot of success with it. Great. Does it apply against southpaws? Are there any instances where it's okay to break the lane rules? Yeah. So there are lots and lots of instances where you can break the rules. Remember, those are a guideline when you're coming in to a fight or a spar with somebody. You just got to remember, whenever you break those rules, you are skewing the risk versus reward ratio. The way that lane theory is set up, it's set up so that you can anticipate or land good, strong, well-structured punches without assuming a lot of risk. Now, obviously, if you're hooking on the line, you don't have as much room to accelerate that shot. There's a tell. All right. You don't have as much space to structure that shot properly. You're going to get beat to the punch by a guy who's throwing straight. if the guy blocks it, he's inside of your defenses and you're cooked standing there in front of him. There's lots of reasons why you wouldn't want to break lane theory. But something I say a lot is you want to recognize that boxing is about a consistent effort. So if you make a mistake, that's okay, get back on track. Or if you make a mistake, what's even better is assume your opponent saw that mistake. Think about how they would take advantage of that mistake and try to bait them to take advantage so you can counter their counter, set them up for a big fall. That's something I do a lot. Like, for example, when I'm parrying, sometimes I'll catch myself, I'm parrying too big. And everybody knows if you see somebody with that rear hand parrying too big, especially on your jab, you're just going to feint the jab and then throw that hook around the side, So if I catch myself parrying too big and I see that look in my opponent's eye, like they saw something, I'll set my hand up so it looks like I'm getting ready to parry big. And then when they feint and go to throw that hook around, I'll snap that hand back to the side of my head and I'll throw my 5 right up their center line and I'll meet them. I'll get them to run into it as they try to hook off that jab. So, I'm anticipating that they saw my mistake, and I'm assuming if I make a mistake, they know about it, give them some credit, give them some respect, and try to kick that can down the road. Be the first to make an adjustment so that you don't get caught. Don't hope for the best, plan for the worst, okay?
Probably a good chance to tell them about the difference in lane theory with southpaws, how the southpaw offense dictates your defense.
Yeah, we're planning a video on this. I have somebody, I can't remember who they are, please forgive me, who shows up on every single one of my videos. In the comment section, they say lane theory for southpaws, lane theory for southpaws. And I really appreciate that. For me, I don't want to say it's the same, but because there are definitely differences that you should know about where the openings are. Look at our What Makes Southpaw Different video. If you haven't looked at that yet, that's very important. It's an older one. I think it's my best video ever. I don't think we've ever made a video that's denser with knowledge and information than that particular video. It hurts me that it's not more popular, but that's okay. Here's the important thing to remember. Your lanes dictate your offense. If somebody is in my cross lane, I can hit them with the cross or the 3, okay? The 6 if they're close, whatever. All right. Your opponent's lanes dictate their offense, which means that their lanes dictate your defense. So you need to know whether it's a southpaw or whether it's an orthodox fighter. If you're in their cross lane, they can hit you with the cross or the 3, or if you're close, the 6, okay? Lee and I are working on making little infographics that we can slide around that shows all the positions for these punches. So we could overlap 2 different guys and orient them in different positions. And you guys would be able to see where the lanes are kind of real time as they move around. And we're going to make 3 of them. We're going to make 2 orthodox ones so we can talk about closed exchanges. And then we're going to make a southpaw one so we can talk about open exchanges too. And I know you guys are looking forward to that video. We're trying to figure out exactly what we need to do to communicate that clearly with the infographic. Okay.